Yep, sure as shit. I've got a second coolant leak on this frickin' thing. the When I replaced the radiator on this Dodge Stratus, boy, that pipe looks bad. Basically, I noticed that I was starting to get a coolant leak on the ground when I was at work, and it obviously isn't the water pump because that really let go. So what I think it is here you can probably see right down there in the middle of the screen, you can see that green discoloration on the bottom of the frame rail, or the well, it's part of the engine where the coolant is pooling up, and it's the problem is this lower radiator pipe that attaches to the lower radiator hose, and it goes into the back of the water pump, and there's an O-ring and a pipe in there, and it is leaking. So that's the problem with old water pumps. I mean, old O-rings that are like 10, 12 years old or older, or 20 years old. This is a 97, and I bet it's original. So I'm going to have to pull that pipe out of there. I think the pipe costs about $40, but I'm going to have to check the pipe and see if it's bad. And if it is bad, I'll replace it. If it isn't, I'll just throw some new O-rings on there, and they're about $6. So $6 and a little elbow grease, and I'll have my car back. Plus, I've got some new brake shoes for the back. So yeah, I'll get this thing running again. My goal is to keep this car going until I'm a Bitcoin millionaire. And when that happens, who knows what I'll do? I have no idea what I'll do. I'll figure something out, though. I might get my truck tricked out, get some body work done, which I am not able to do, and maybe replace some of the bushings in the steering, and get some new tires for it, and then I'll have my awesome vehicle back. Then I might go on a grand tour of permaculture farms, and basically get more into the permaculture side of things. So good times. Yeah, permaculture is a way of gardening that basically takes away the need for irrigation as well as fertilizer and pesticides, and basically once you have it set up correctly, it basically produces tremendous amounts of food at zero cost. It's a tremendous thing. Then you can put animals in your design, and they do important things like keeping down the vegetation, and their manure fertilizes the ground, and it's just a tremendous thing. Yeah, each animal is a certain, in a way, is it's in its happiest situation, where the animal is at its greatest happiness. It is being very useful to you in various different jobs, tons of different jobs, such as getting rid of giant, humongous growths of blackberries. A couple of pigs fenced in with an electric net fence will just destroy a big bunch of blackberries. There's a farmer, Paul Wheaton actually tells a story about a guy named Sepp Holzer who lives in the Swiss Alps, and he grows oranges up there in the mountains, which is pretty intense. But anyway, he was saying to this guy who was saying that he doesn't like having pigs because he's a vegan, right? And he doesn't want pigs, but how does he get rid of blackberries? And Sepp Holzer said, well, you must do the pig's work, if that's the case. So, yeah. So, good times. I am going to get started on this and enjoy my Sunday. Oddly enough, I find this sort of thing kind of therapeutic. Working on machines. It's my thing, guys. What can I say? I'm a gadget freak. And there are worse things for a gadget freak to be than a mechanic. So I will see you around. Oh, and don't get married. Okay, I pulled the negative battery cable so I don't spark this thing. Then I pulled the alternator loose, pulled the cables off the alternator. Then I pulled the two bolts out of the lower water delivery pipe, water inlet pipe, I guess you could say. And now I pulled it out a little bit so that the coolant is draining. And now that's allowing me to empty out the top radiator hose. And then momentarily I will pull the thermostat housing here. I find it easier to have this whole thing out of the way. Then I'll pull the upper radiator hose and get that out of the way. Then I'll be able to get the alternator out of there. Then I should be able to get my hands in there well enough to pull those ridiculous spring clamps that all the manufacturers seem to be so fond of on the hoses there. And then get that coolant pipe out of there. Then I can inspect it, run it on the wire wheel, get it cleaned up, and see if I think I can reuse it. And if I can, I'll get O-rings for it, and if I can't, I'll replace the whole pipe. Okay, it looks like I didn't put the clamp in the right spot, so I'm going to have to pull this upper thing here. So this whole bracket. So, you know, for access. That'll give me a little more room though. Okay. These plastic locking fasteners here are always a problem if you're going to be doing any home repair. Basically, they sort of pop up like so. And then you pull the little center thing, then the outer part, and these things are made of plastic, and when they get to be more than 5 years old or so, they become brittle. So it's a good idea to get some replacements. And they sell them on Amazon. Maybe I'll add a link here. So anyway, that's what they're supposed to look like. And here's the little plunger device, and pops right in and it holds it in. So yeah, I highly recommend not trying to reuse these. Alrighty. Come on, turd. That one doesn't look too bad. I won't reuse it though. Okay. And I'll just sort of set this thing over there. Good times. Alright, now I'll get this upper radiator hose out of the way and then see if I can get this alternator out of the way. Then I'll be able to get in there and actually touch and work with that pipe. I might have to pull more stuff out, like the alternator bracket, alternator and power steering pump, AC pump house bracket, but let's hope not. Let's see. Where's 5/16? 5/16. I bought this thing by mistake, but I'm very happy with it, oddly enough. And I think since Cirrus is pretty much belly up, if you want one of these, you better hurry. This little 5/16 socket in my driver has a magnet on it, so it actually holds on to the hose clamp. Good times. Okay, tied the AC hose out of the way to give me a little pathway to get that alternator out. And it's out. Okay, now I should be able to, oh yeah, it's going to be much better. Yeah, I think I'm going to pull the entire alternator and power steering, no, air conditioning compressor bracket, this whole assembly. I'm going to pull that whole thing and get it out of the way. That way I'll be able to get into the back of the water pump housing and really clean all the debris out of there. You can see my nice new water pump I installed 2 weeks ago. And that's when I just, and then the water, this lower radiator hose, when I put that on, it wiggled it a little bit and disturbed that old O-ring that's back here. So the result is I got a leak. I was so afraid it was the water pump again that I was like driving home on eggshells, watching that temperature gauge like a hawk. But it never overheated. It's just because when the water pump let go, man, it just puked the coolant out. But this time it just sort of oozed out. So it obviously was something different. I was pretty pissed off at O'Reilly Auto Parts for giving me a shitty water pump until I realized that it's not the water pump. Okay. Can I get it out? That's the question. Yay! Put the bolts back with this thing so I don't lose them. Now that gives me vastly better access to that pipe, as well as these two spring clamps for their lower radiator hose, as well as the coolant pipe. Now let's see if I can salvage this thing. Got it. Well, the pipe doesn't look too bad. That O-ring has certainly seen better days, though. Yep, that's it. That's what was leaking. Yeah. There are just pieces of the O-ring everywhere. Wow, look at that. The thing is massively eroded. What the hell happened? I've never seen one like this before. Well, I'll get the pipe out, clean it up, and see if I can salvage it. Well, there's our new O-ring, although for some reason O'Reilly Auto Parts calls it a gasket. And compared to the old gasket O-ring, Amazon wanted $11 for this, and O'Reilly Auto Parts charged me $1.86. Amusing. Yep, for some reason they called it a gasket. Okay. Okay. I cleaned up the inside surface of the back of the water pump, and I cleaned up the flange of the pipe, and the pipe feels good. Once I got all the goo off and the hardened O-ring material that was stuck, it was able to be very smooth, and I think it's good. I utilized some of this brown Scotch-Brite pad material. It's kind of like the green pads you use for dishes, only a little harder than it's for industrial stuff. Yeah, I am bezeled. It was it was used, so I satisfied my my morality with the fact that it wasn't new. But if something's laying around on the floor and about to get thrown away, I will ignore my morality and throw it in my lunchbox and take it home if it's useful. Like see that red hose clamp? That used to be part of an EGR cooler. And I replaced the hose clamps, but the old ones were probably okay to reuse, so I went ahead and took those home. Yeah, I'm an evil guy. I went ahead and cleaned it in place, so I didn't take those two hoses off. So if you can leave a hose undisturbed, then the chances of it leaking once you put it back together again are smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and put that clamp back on that top hose there, and then put this whole thing back together again. Good times. I'm rather fond of my car, so I won't put it in without lube. Oh, baby. Make sure I use the right one. Let's see, which one was new? I think I'll take this one. All right. And in we go. I promise I have protection. Okay, got the bottom of the two bolts in. And this does not look like an 8 millimeter. It is a 6 millimeter. And typically in steel, an 8 millimeter bolt is like 18 foot-pounds. So this is probably around maybe 14 or 15 foot-pounds. It's always a good idea to, if you're a mechanic, to have a set of specs for generic bolts. The torques for generic bolts in what medium, like 18 or like an 8 millimeter bolt in aluminum is significantly less than an 8 millimeter bolt in steel. And then you have the higher or lower torques. This is or strengths. This is a 9.8 bolt. As far as the strength of the bolt goes, there's like 10.9, which are the two common bolt strengths, and they have slightly different torques. This is the lower of the two, so it's probably around 14 foot-pounds. Okay, the two bolts here and here are installed, and now I'm going to proceed with the alternator bracket next, and then start building it back together from there. Okay, alternator bracket is sitting in there, and I'm going to put the three bolts in. These look like a 10 millimeter, and I was correct. So I will check my generic torque list and see what a 10 millimeter bolt in cast iron at 10.9, the higher strength, what that torque is. And that turns out to be 50 foot-pounds. I left my good torque wrench at work, so I'm going to have to use my less than optimal one, but it is better than no torque wrench at all. Oops. Did you hear the socket drop into the bucket of coolant I have below the engine? Well, welcome to the joys of being a mechanic. Brackets in. Next step is the alternator. Well, I'm getting pretty good at putting that alternator in and out. Oh, before I do the alternator, duh, I should do the smaller bracket for the power steering pump below the friggin', or the AC pump below the alternator bracket. Okay, I better do that right now. This one is an 8 millimeter bolt, so typically for a 9.5 this would be, or 9.8, this would be an 18 foot-pounds, 18 to 21. So I'll go ahead and do 21. Yep, sometimes you've got to go forward and backward in this line of work, because this is another bolt that goes into the block from this bracket, and the other three bolts had been torqued, duh, and it didn't allow this last bolt to line up, so I had to break them loose. And now the bolt spins in finger tight. You got to remember the order. You need a good memory to be a mechanic, and that's where I'm hurting. So I write everything down. Okay, now I'll sock these in and torque them. Then I'll put the alternator in. Okay, wiring harness is back in its bracket. And plug in the AC clutch. Okay, that's in. And alternator. Okay, lower pivot bolt for the alternator. I might need two hands for this. Okay. Okay, time to get the belt lined up, then I'll attach the tensioner. Alright, belt's in, alternator's tight, voltage regulator, .12-volt power lead to the batteries. Okay, power lead is tight. Next step, take this little plastic whoop-de-doo for the for the battery lead. Okay, that's on there. Well, I suppose I could either put everything else totally back together and then put the coolant in, and then if it leaks I'll have to take it all apart again. Or I can just put coolant in right now and fire it up and make sure it doesn't spew, and then put the rest of it together. So that's what I'll do. And upper radiator hose. Well, you get the idea. Reservoir hose. Release the air conditioning hose. Okay, now I'll put some coolant in it and see how it looks. Okay, the cooling system has been holding 15 psi for about 15 minutes now, so that is a tight cooling system. No sign of any drippage coming down, except for what dripped when I was doing the job. So, time to put this thing together. These are those pins that I bought from Amazon, and they are solid. Okay. I'm a genetic mutation. I have a thumb that goes way back like that. Useful as when you're a mechanic. Okay, that's together. Now just a few more bolts. Then I'll finish topping off the system. Then it'll be time for a test drive. Although the cooling system holds pressure, so it's almost certain to be good, but you know, I could use a little drive anyway. I've got a lot of air trapped inside the block. It's coming out real slow. There's a hole in the thermostat that allows the air inside the block to escape, but it's kind of slow going. And when I pressurized it, it pushed it all down and equalized. Then when I released it, the air in the block expanded, and then it was coming out the top. So I'll just have to slowly add it in until it stops bubbling. Yeah, my heater core probably drained out too, so I won't be able to get all this back in until I start the engine and run it with the temperature selector on hot. Still venting. Negative battery cable. I guess it's time to light this thing off. Turn the heater on hot. Lovely. And pour the rest in the reservoir. Then it'll be time to take it on the road. I like these little filter funnels. Okay, well, I'm editing this video together and I realize I ended it abruptly, so I'll just tell you the rest of the story. I took it on a test drive and I brought it home and let it cool down and then topped off the coolant, and it's ready to go now. I'd like to work on the rear brakes, but I'm pretty done for the day. So maybe tomorrow or something. So, successful road test, good repair. Later.